Welcome and thank you for tuning in. You're listening to the Beyond 50 radio program. I'm Daniel Davis. On the program today, we're going to be talking with a wonderful guest who's going to be sharing with us what it's like to basically keep yourself pretty much in prison, but not directly. She suffered from a lifelong dispute of panic attacks, tried everything from spirituality to even carrying around secretly a small, vast vodka just to keep herself calm. Now, you'd think for yourself, well, that seems pretty unfortunate, but her life has been fortunate as well. She's also had wonderful success, best-selling book known as The Faith Club, a loving husband, and 2 wonderful children. So how does one kind of toe the line, walk the tightrope, and find the balance that they find themselves being able to pull out and feel the freedom that all of us desire to have? Well, that's what she's going to share with us today. I'd like to welcome to our Beyond 50 radio program our guest, author of Learning to Breathe, our guest, Ms. Priscilla Warner. Priscilla, thank you for joining us here on the Beyond 50 radio program.
Hello, thank you for having me.
You bet. Do you feel anxiety now, or are you feeling pretty calm?
You know, I'm feeling very calm. I heard your introduction, and I kind of went, oh, who was that person? Yes, I remember that person. But it's not really me anymore.
Oh, I see. Now, tell us about this. I mean, you know, you're somebody who's enjoyed wonderful good fortune and success, but at the same time, you kind of, I guess you might feel that there might have been a distance between the reality of it and where you were. Tell us about that.
Yeah, definitely. I say now that I always knew that I was fortunate, but now I really feel fortunate. I always knew that I had a lot to be grateful for, and now I feel very grateful. I'm able to, what happened was I was able to heal from my panic disorder and anxiety, and I really did rewire my brain as much as I think I could have done with the various treatments, techniques, teachings, and really the heart of my experience was learning how to meditate.
Mm-hmm. Now, how did all this start? About what age? And tell us what that was like.
I had my first panic attack when I was 15 years old.
Wow.
And back then, I'm old enough, well, I'm beyond 50, shall we say.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm old enough so that there was no word for what I experienced. I was a waitress in a cafeteria in a college town. I grew up in Providence, Rhode Island. And I was a waitress. And one day I just started, I had all of the classic signs that are now in the DSM for a panic disorder. My heart started racing and pounding. My throat closed up. I started hyperventilating. I couldn't breathe. I felt like I couldn't breathe, but I was breathing too fast. And I really thought I was dying. And I managed to call my parents. And when I got home, a doctor paid a house call, and he took my vital signs, and he announced to me that I was just a little bit nervous. And as I say in the book, it was not just a little, but it felt really like nobody else in the world experienced what I was experiencing. And he gave me a prescription for tranquilizers, and I took them, and they just made me really sleepy. They weren't the cure, and I have now admitted in my book I carried a flask of vodka around when I was a teenager because it wasn't to get drunk. It was just to feel when the vodka would hit my throat and my lungs, I just calmed down in a way that I couldn't, now I call it self-regulating, but it was something I just couldn't do on my own.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you know, there are a lot of people, especially, it seems this day and age, when it comes to the use of alcohol, that actually do it for that very reason. It isn't the intention that their life is miserable and they're, you know, as a lot of treatment centers would try to lead people to believe, but, you know, it's a real sort of an over-the-counter medication in many ways for people.
For me, it certainly was. I mean, it was it was my security blanket, too. I knew that it would be quick. You know, if you take a gulp of vodka, it acts quickly. If you have to go to psychotherapy, it takes a lot longer. If you take a pill, it works. But I don't know, there was something, liquor is quicker, as they say. But and then I managed to, I built a life. A lot of the people that I talk to now, after the publication of the book, also, you would never know necessarily that they suffered from anxiety the way that I did, and often crippling anxiety. I mean, I had a career in advertising where probably not the best place to have to spend a lot of time if you're prone to anxiety. But in a way, some readers have said to me, you know, sometimes anxiety really fuels people, and it really, work is, sometimes you can pour yourself into your work to escape anxiety, or you can channel your anxiety that way.
Now, I have to ask Priscilla, because I've actually seen this with people, but when it comes to having panic or anxiety, or even anxiety attacks, I'm sure you probably found yourself in situations where people said, this is a lot of nonsense, get over this, and what is that experience like? I mean, what it feels like to you as a person who goes through this, especially when you have people, from the outside looking in, just basically saying, come on, get over it, kind of face your fears, so to speak.
Yeah, that's a great question, because it's also, a lot of people make light of it too. People talk about having a panic attack now, if they can't find their shoe size at a sample sale or something, or, oh my God, if I had $1 for every time anybody said they had a panic attack, and, even my beloved husband, who I've been married for 30 years, and he's been fantastic, but I think there were times in his life where he couldn't imagine the way I felt. It
right.
was just not, and he never said, snap out of it or get over it, but until you've experienced that kind of anxiety, I don't think you can ever really even imagine how seriously you really do feel like you're dying. And, there were people, I have friends who have known me for literally 45 years, since I went to school with them back a long time ago. And a couple of them read the book and said, I'm so sorry, I just didn't know how much you suffered. And I think not that they made light of it, but I think that they just, they could never really imagine what it felt like. I remember when I was pregnant, this one woman, because I had a lot of panic attacks with my second pregnancy particularly, and this one woman said to me, I said, oh my God, I just feel awful. And she said, oh, my tennis game has never been better. A, I don't play tennis, but B, I thought, wow, that's amazing that somebody could even utter those words, because the way I'm feeling, I can't even function, let alone, hop around in a tennis court. But I think one person's excitement is another person's sheer terror. We all experience things in our body really differently, depending on our age, depending on, our background and what, our makeup and how we were raised. And I don't know, we should all appreciate each other's qualities. And when somebody says that they're hurting, you just kind of have to believe them.
Mm-hmm. Now, what does it feel like to go through this? What goes on in the mind, if you will? Now, I kind of liken this to experiences that I had when I was younger, even in my adult years as well, where there seemed to be this internal chatter going on, where you would actually get into these loops where you would play over and over something that really had already happened. You'd already went through, let's say, the punishment if there was one actually attached to it. But you were always sort of on high alert, like, when is it going to come around the corner again? And it's like you're basically preparing yourself for something just short of feeling like you're going to die, I guess it was. What was going on with you? Yeah. I know this because, see, I had actually been, and I share this, and I'm sure there are going to be listeners out there that go, that's true. So when you talk about panic or anxiety, and you have people on the outside thinking, this is a lot of nonsense, get over it, but the truth is it really causes you to freeze, just like you feel like things are at a level where you feel like you're going to die.
You feel completely out of control.
Mm-hmm.
I remember I'd be going for like a job interview. I live outside of New York, and I lived in New York City for many years and worked in New York City in ad agencies. And I remember, having a big presentation or going for a job interview, I would take myself to Central Park and I would just pound the pavements, running, jogging, just trying to wear my body out so that when it came time later in the day to perform, it wouldn't rear up and, attack me. I felt like my body was betraying me. And yeah, I always felt like you just never knew what could be around the corner. And I just also felt like I didn't function the way other people functioned, that mm-hmm. there was something defective about my system. And that even though, I read that other people had this disorder or, they were anxious or even used the word panic, but it just felt like my body was out of control. So the notion, now I've learned that there's so many ways to, as they call it, self-regulate, and there's so many ways to make friends with your body's central nervous system and to desensitize the kinds of feelings that I had, but so I broke the cycle. There is this kind of cycle to anxiety. The way it was described to me is people function up and down. We're on the radio, so I can't show you, but if you were to sort of wave your hand up and down in these sort of symmetrical waves during the course of your lifetime or your day or hourly, we all have ups and downs, but we rebound from them. And I was kind of jerking up and down, these pointed, spiky, if you think of an EKG, I was just really on and off the charts, up and down and up and down. And something like Valium, which I did take, it certainly helped to level out the peaks and valleys. But now, through meditation and particularly EMDR, which is a treatment, a kind of psychotherapy I did that stands for eye movement desensitization and reprocessing, I really was able to rewire my brain so that I don't have those same kinds of highs and lows. My body is more able to regulate itself.
Now, over the course of our program here on Beyond 50, we've actually had wonderful people in the field of neuroscience. And one of the more interesting people I know that we've had within the last month or so was Dr. Bruce Lipton, and his book is The Biology of Belief. And it's quite fascinating how we store memories at a cellular level. Now, just imagine someone like you, for instance, or people out there who suffer from anxiety attacks. And as we were talking about earlier, you tend to sort of play loops, and it's a means to protect yourself. And I think it was really interesting that along the course of the way, there was another neuroscientist that we had on the program, and he brought something up in a book that he wrote that you never thought about it this way before, but it was quite interesting that he says the brain is built for survival. And the bottom line is that, that's what it's for. That's inherently what it helps us do, is to survive, the fight or flight as they call it. And even though you might have had a situation, it might have been even just a slight trauma where for others they would have said, well, yeah, that was a problem, but I got through it and, I'm moving on with life. But for someone, like yourself or others, or even as I had experienced it in portions of my life, you'll play that loop as though you're trying to survive something close to death. And again, try to describe that for our listeners, what that's like to replay that loop and what it was like when you finally found that freedom.
It's very true. That loop is exactly what I felt over and over again. And with this EMDR therapy, what it is you can use lights, tones, or tapping. And so for me it was lights. And you follow this panel of flashing lights. You hold your head straight and you follow it with your eyes so that you're tracking it just with your eyes. And what it does is it bilaterally stimulates the left and right sides of your brain. So the way it was explained to me, when you experience emotional events, they're experienced on the right side of the brain. And then they are processed and categorized in the left side of your brain. But often traumatic experiences, even if it's not, one of the other things is that I now have a new definition of trauma. And when it was first a wonderful neurologist named Robert Scare, when I was talking to him, he said, well, you suffered a trauma, which I did as a child. I almost died and had an emergency tracheotomy. And he said, what you experienced was traumatic. And I said, God forbid I wasn't raped. I wasn't in Vietnam. I was self-conscious about calling myself a survivor. But, hundreds of panic attacks, those in themselves are trauma. But anyway, when you've experienced this traumatic experience, it gets frozen in your limbic system. And yes, that fight-flight response, when I had my brain scanned, which I did have done at the University of Pennsylvania by a neuroscientist who I meditated for 8 weeks, he did before and after scans of my brain. When he was first showing me the scans, I said, well, where's my amygdala? And I was sure my amygdala, which is, controls fight or flight response, would be like the size of King Kong's or something. And and when he said to me, he could barely find it on the scan. Yes. I thought they were going to say, oh, my God, get this woman. We've got to get her to a lab. I'd never seen anything like it because I really felt like I'd worn my central nervous system out. But he said, oh, here it is. It was this benign little thing that I had grown to freakish proportions in my mind. But anyway, what EMDR does is you watch these flashing lights and you can feel, it's almost like, this is therapist, it's almost like psychic surgery. There's something about this bilateral stimulation that you do yourself with your eyes that it's almost like it moved, I said, like a little grain of sand in my brain, and it just turned over something with a very delicate scalpel, and these memories started coming back to me, and they weren't, the therapist said to me, you don't have to do anything. Your brain will go, it knows where it needs to go in order to heal. Mm-hmm. And when I was sitting there the very first time, I had, my hands and my feet were tingling like crazy. And I said, and I didn't remark on it until the end, and she said, that's your nervous system discharging. And it's unbelievable because my thing about anxiety was I would hyperventilate. I was always afraid I was just going to, I was breathing too much, but I thought I couldn't breathe. And slowly and surely, I started desensitizing my brain and my central nervous system so that I no longer get those kinds of symptoms when I'm under stress. I have other symptoms. I'm kind of getting to know my body in a whole new way because I never knew what it was like to feel depressed before. I was always on high alert. I think my body, well, I know what happened. You can either shut down or you can overactivate lots of times in life, and I think I chose overactivating versus shutting down. So sometimes I've had to experience things on a different level now that not really my anxiety is gone. But so all of the symptoms that I used to feel for stress, it's very odd, but they don't happen anymore. Mm-hmm. It's really, really amazing. I credit now meditation. I like the combination of the meditation and the EMDR. And then I did a bunch of other really fun things like chanting. I love this particular kind of
Ayurvedic oil treatments.
Oh, yes. Those. I mean, if I could have those every day.
On the quest for the mystic rabbi.
Yes. And I did meditative painting. I did this kind of Tibetan Thangka painting where you paint the Buddha's face over and over again, and you do it in the most meticulous way. So you kind of squeeze everything else out of your brain so that all you can do is focus. Well, this one wonderful woman, psychologist named Belarus Naprostek, who does guided imagery. Mm-hmm. She says that any time that you're focused on something to the exclusion of anything else or almost everything else, you're meditating. So, I make jewelry. Anytime I'm deeply immersed in beading, or if you're deeply immersed in an experience that's outside of yourself. When you talk about that loop that keeps running in your head, that is this interior kind of a hell that we put ourselves through, over and over again.
It's quite incredible, too, the battles you find yourself feeling, and if you catch yourself in the moment, and I'm sure for the listeners out there who experience this or have experienced this, pay attention to what your body is doing. It's quite amazing how tense you are. I mean, you can even rerun a physical fight, if you will, and there's nobody else in the room.
You're right. It's amazing. I mean, and then your body holds on to memories. This Dr. Scare, this neurologist, wrote a book called The Body Bears a Burden. And I feel sort of badly that I put my body through what I put it through, all of those years of anxiety and panic. But, we have an enormous capacity to heal. That is something I'm so excited about and so grateful for. And I've gotten so much response from readers who they're just so excited to read a story that has a lot of hope in it. And I'm pretty self-deprecating. I try not to take myself terribly seriously, even though I lived a life that, I had a lot of panic in it. I had a lot of joy and a lot of, life is full of all kinds of ups and downs. And it's just wonderful to feel that I can experience it now entirely, the whole gamut of emotions.
I think what's really fascinating at this juncture, too, Priscilla, is that, here, as we were talking about, you're in this constant loop, your body's on high alert, then you get to a point that you're able to release that you have the ability now to experience what being now is really totally all about, and that we are emotional beings, that there's a reason that we were gifted to have the power of emotion in our lives. From your experience, what would you say that gift is most about, that emotional gift of being alive?
First of all, I just want to thank you for this interview because your questions are fantastic.
Well, you're a fantastic person to come coming this far.
Well, you really understand what I'm feeling. It's kind of eerie. To be alive and to be able to feel the range of emotions that I feel and to be able to be free to experience them is absolutely exhilarating.
Yeah. Because emotions are necessary. They're really a barometer. They're an antenna to let you know this is going on in your life, and this is exciting and exhilarating, or this is going on, and it don't feel so good, so let's take a look at why and move forward. But anyway, in your words.
Yeah, well, I think it depends on how you grew up. You know, if you grew up in a household where those kinds of emotions were not considered frightening, or if people worked through them in a way that was helpful, if people, you know, if you grew up in the perfect household, say.
Yeah, where's that?
You know.
Maybe the Kardashians, huh? No, please, let's not bring me. I never brought them up on my show before until now. I screwed up.
I don't know what possibly.
It was all because of Barbara
them.
Walters the other night calling these people one of the most fascinating people of 2001. I've lost my mind here. Go ahead.
I actually watched the Kardashians for the first time the other day because I thought, you know, I was flipping the channels and I saw them. I thought, okay, you know, I'm into honoring whatever journey anybody's on, whatever path they're taking. So let's see what the Kardashians' path is. But sorry, I got a bit sidetracked with the Kardashians. You know, I didn't have the worst. I said to this therapist, "Do you think I had a hard life?" And she said, "You know, you had a life."
Right.
And that was just such a beautiful way to put it. I had a life. I had a life with parents who they weren't able. I said to some therapist, you know, why didn't my parents ground me? And she said, because they weren't grounded themselves. So, you know, I'm a mother of two sons. Yeah, and I'm a mother of two sons, 21 and 25. And
right.
One of my biggest lessons as a mother was one of my kids didn't like to swim, and he went to this nursery school at a Y where they had a pool. So go figure, I didn't know he didn't like to swim. And so every Wednesday they have to swim. And he would say to me, Mommy, he'd start getting worried about it on Sunday night. Mommy, I don't want to swim. I don't want to swim. Will you come with me? And I said, well, I can't come to nursery school with you. But, Mommy, will you come? Okay, I'll come to the pool. So I found myself sitting by the side of a pool, waiting for my adorable little toddler to come out in his bathing suit. He'd glance up at me, and he'd see that I was there, and then he'd do his thing, and then it would be fine till the next week when he got worried again. And I did this a few times, and then one day I was sitting there, and this woman came up to me and tapped me on the shoulder and introduced herself. She was a school psychologist. They had ambushed me without telling me. But she didn't tell me that at first. She said, what are you doing here? I said, oh, my son is swimming. And she said, but what are you doing here? I said, well, I'm watching him. She said, but what are you doing here? And I said, huh? And she said, I'm the school psychologist. And she proceeded very nicely to explain to me that if I tried to level out every time my child experienced pain or a bump in the road, if I tried to erase that pain, I wasn't doing them any favors. And, you know, it's a very hard thing to figure out how to nurture somebody, whether it's a parent-child or whether it's a spouse or sibling or dear friend, somebody going through a painful process. They have to experience it. You have to experience a certain amount of pain and learn that you have the ability to get through it and to come out on the other side. And if somebody takes away that experience or minimizes it, as you were saying earlier, by making fun of it, or if they are overprotective, you know, there are a million ways that you can get it wrong, but really just staying with someone. It was so powerful. I was having this massage treatment therapy called Traeger therapy. It was a very light touch therapy, and you almost think the therapist is doing nothing. And I had another trauma as a child. I broke my collarbone, and nobody knew about it. I didn't tell anybody. I was riding a horse. I fell off, and grown-ups at the place I rode told me not to tell anybody. So for 3 weeks I walked around with a broken collarbone and didn't tell anybody. And when I got up from her table, I felt, I don't know, it sounds kind of crazy when you describe it. You have to read the book. It doesn't sound as out of context. But I said to her afterwards, what did you do? And I was very overcome with emotion. And she said, I just stayed with you. And, you know, I didn't have that experience previously where somebody just was by my side and didn't tell me that it was the worst thing that had ever happened and didn't tell me that I'd get through it. So I didn't really know how to, as I keep saying, self-regulate. And through this process, I have learned that I'm much stronger. I think the message of the book is that we're much stronger than we think we are, and we are capable of everybody is capable of having the kind of joy that I feel now. And I've been tested. I lost somebody very dear to me at the end of the book and very close to me, and it was very upsetting and traumatic, but I made it through to the other side because that's kind of how it goes, you know. And the practice of meditation is so helpful because what you learn is that every moment does pass. You know, I was with a Zen teacher at the very end of the book who sits with people who are dying. She really is an incredibly powerful, thoughtful teacher. And she said, you know, the reason that we are so still in the Zen practice in her place where I was meditating with her, she said, is because it's a lesson that, if your ear itches and you don't scratch it, it drives you crazy, you sit, and then it shifts. And then your leg hurts, and then you sit with that, and then something else shifts, and, something else aches, or, your mind starts to wander. We're always shifting and always changing.
You bring up Zen, and I remember back in the 1980s, that was actually a practice that I began to embrace. It just kind of came to me, and I thought, I think this is my spiritual path, if you will. And it's amazing when you decide to walk down a particular path, the myriad of ways that it takes you, and ways that you probably never would have imagined. But at this particular moment, I had the opportunity where I had made an acquaintance with a Japanese woman, and I was telling her about my experience, and she says, why don't you come with me one night? And she took me to a Japanese tea ceremony. And this happened to be in the city that I was living in, where a woman actually had created a place in her basement, a Japanese woman, probably in her late 60s, so that she could help people who were Japanese to have this tradition that they have in Japan, the tea ceremony. And I'll tell you, it was an interesting experience. You talk about being here in the now. This is one of those moments that'll take you there. And why I say that, it isn't so much what happens within the ritual of making the tea, but for me, it was sitting in the tea position where you have your legs tucked underneath your behind, and pretty soon it's like, when is this thing going to end, because my legs are beginning to kill me. And you never know. And the funny thing is the good thing about pain, even though we don't like it, is at least pain as a friend lets you know that you're still alive. And boy, was I alive that night. I was just, is this ever going to end? But I noticed that I was in that moment. I was trying to meditate the pain out after a while. It seemed like this was 2.5, 3 hours this was going on. But at the same time, what I never forgot was the pliability of the older lady that was conducting this. She moved around, though her legs were like rubber. And I thought, so is this one of the levels that this tea ceremony takes you to? But it certainly, you shut down everything that was going on outside of that room, and you were only in the moment of what was going on in that room. And when you left, it's like you kind of went outside, and there was a whole wide world out there. And it was really an amazing experience. And being able to have that, as you've been able to achieve through meditation, you realize that's what we get to have, is that continuous, infinite moment of being alive. That we can truly, as you said, we can not only be in that moment, but trust that we have the ability to make the perfect decision in that moment, regardless of what's happening. And that's true freedom, I would think.
Yes. You put it so beautifully. You absolutely.
I'm looking at the pictures on your website, and I couldn't think of another way to do it.
Well, I have these. I did do a Japanese tea ceremony actually with a friend that I just briefly described in the book, and it was not. I must say, it was not 2.5 hours of sitting. I got the beginner experience at a wonderful place in New York that actually used to be Mark Rothko, the painter. It used to be his studio. It's in an old stable. If you're ever in New York, it's on 69th Street. And they do a Japanese tea ceremony. But yes, the wonderful thing about meditation, and I only practice 20 minutes a day, because that's the neuroscientist that I talked to assured me that 20 minutes a day over time, it's not about, you don't have to do it. If you do it 3 hours on a weekend and then you don't do it for 6 days, it's not the same effect as sitting down every day for as long as you can, even if it's just a few minutes. That to actually retrain your brain. This one neuroscientist said that meditation is like lifting weights for your brain, that just as people are told that they should be exercising half an hour a day or whatever, eventually they'll say 20 minutes a day of meditation will be terrific. But it gives you like a mini Japanese tea ceremony. Mm-hmm. Every time I do it, I know that, and my legs aren't going to hurt as much, but I know I can take myself to that place of, it's not rest, it's a kind of an awareness, but letting go at the same time. So there's just something about knowing. I used to describe it as kind of, the first time I did guided imagery, I said it was sort of like somebody had led me to a secret garden. And once I saw that garden, I wanted to go back there again and again on my own. Mm-hmm. And I've kind of learned how to do that now, to the point where I have these little meditative moments on my website where I will literally be parked on the street and in the rain, and I'll see the Dunkin' Donuts sign through my window, and I see the beauty of the raindrops and the orange and pink, whatever the colors of the Dunkin' Donuts logo are, and in that moment, I'm transported outside of myself. Mm-hmm. And for a person who lives with that constant loop of anxiety, it's wonderful to be taken outside of your own brain, and it's, jumping around and chattering. And in a funny way, parenting did that for me, coming outside of myself. It was challenging to, grow up and to manage my own anxiety, and certainly being a parent is complicated, and it brings its challenges. But one of the things I loved most about it from the moment I gave birth was there's something outside of myself that I could place my focus on and just get away from my own chattering mind.
Mm-hmm. Kind of get out of your own way, if you will.
Yes, exactly. Exactly. Oh, you're reading my mind today, I have to say. But I used to say to myself before I had this experience, I wish I could just get out of my own way.
Yeah,
like I was in my own way.
It's interesting because there was a guest that I had. It was a few weeks ago, and we were talking about success and creating abundance and attracting, the things that you want in your life, creating little miracles, if you will. And she had said something, it was within her book, and she actually said it as well on the program. She says, when I asked, what do you think is the biggest barrier from people having a fulfilling life, for having everything they desire, from being able to create these miracles that, this is something all of us have within inside of ourselves. She says after more than 30 years of doing the work that she's been doing with people to help them manifest and create miracles, she said the number one most consistent thing that she sees is people just don't get out of their own way. And I think there are sometimes people go, what does that mean? But someone like you, Priscilla, presents exactly what that is. Through the process of these panic attacks that you have, being out in the world and feeling like you're just closed off, you've began to see through your experience that that's exactly what it is.
Absolutely. No question. I got out of my own way. It's wonderful. I don't, as I said when you were introducing me before, that sounds like a different person to me. I don't diminish what happened to me. Mm-hmm. But, I just got out of my own way, and I stopped. I think in a funny way, it's funny because in the book when I did realize that my panic was leaving me, I missed it. When you bang your head against a wall enough, or when you become...
Right, when you count on it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, one of these wonderful Buddhist teachers that I studied with, her name is Tara Brach, and many people reiterated this. We can become attached to suffering, as strange as it seems, but when it's familiar to you, if you've ever stayed at a job too long, or in a marriage, or in any kind of relationship or business, whatever relationship you have, whatever situation you're in, sometimes we, rather than change, we get very comfortable with whatever situation we're in. And, there were times that I worried that my book was self-indulgent, and it was selfish of me to seek happiness. That's my latest thing, is I'm trying to write a blog post for Psychology Today, and is it selfish to seek happiness? And at the end of the day, I think people are a lot happier with a happy Priscilla. I think I did some people a favor by, I keep using it, but getting out of my own way. And there's one therapist, I had a lot of my family. My father was manic depressive. His twin brother was in and out of mental hospitals all his life. My namesake is a homeless schizophrenic woman who was my father's favorite cousin. I was surrounded by these people who suffered a lot and had a lot of pain and couldn't seem to figure out how to get themselves out of it. And there was sort of a part of me that was familiar being attached to that pain. And when I had to leave it behind, I felt selfish. I felt like I just had a hard time being happy. It sounds crazy, but that was one of the things that I discovered on my winding road in this book.
Now, Priscilla, if you can, tell us about your website. And they're just letting the listeners know, and I went to resources, and there are a few familiar faces that I've had the pleasure to meet and interview over the years. But tell us about your website and how people can get to it. Sure.
It's PriscillaWarnerBooks.com. And I posted all of my meditative moments, and I have a Facebook page where people post. It's wonderful because people will now send me pictures of a rainbow in Miami, a fire that they're having somewhere up in Vermont or someplace, and people from all over the country now are posting videos so that they are showing other people their own meditative moments. But and then on the resources page, a lot of people ask me for resources on just people who are starting out in meditation or want to know more about EMDR therapy or Trager therapy. So I link to some of the fantastic Buddhist teachers, to the rabbi I met, to everything I did in the book, basically. And it doesn't have to cost a fortune. You don't have to. You can do a lot of things with a simple download. There's also a wonderful website called dharmaseed.org, which is pay as you go. You make a contribution, and you can study. You can really. There's so much you can do online there in terms of studying with people and just listening to lectures and things.
And the biggest thing, too, is you discovered that we all actually have that special ability within us through meditation, which is free. All you need to do is invest some of your time.
Yes, it's free. As Sharon Salzberg, another wonderful teacher I studied with, said, you don't need to burn incense in the middle of a contentious meeting. You don't have to pull out a meditation cushion. You can always follow your breath. And for me, I hyperventilated, so just breathe is what my mother used to say. And I thought, just breathe. I mean, why would you tell me that? I'm breathing too damn much. I can't figure it out. But the fact of the matter is now my breath is my best friend.
Right.
Even in the middle of a meeting or, in the middle of a busy day, you can always, even if you have to tuck into the men's room at work, I don't know what a men's room actually looks like, but I imagine there's a place where you can just sit for a moment and go back to yourself and go back to your breath.
Mm-hmm. Fascinating. I know Sharon Salzberg, I had the opportunity about 12 or 13 years ago. I had met and interviewed with her, and I helped her coin a phrase that she thought was rather amusing because we were in a day and age where people want everything fast, they expect it to be easy, and eventually those things do happen. But I said, I think what you're saying is that people really want to discover, where's the drive-through Dharma?
Exactly, that's perfect. Well, people, even dear friends, when they come up to me and they say, I want to learn how to meditate, if they're having a particularly bad day, they'll come up to me, I need to learn how to meditate. How can they want a fix? They want the quick fix. And I wanted it too. I went on my first 5-day meditation retreat, which had long periods of silence, with a wonderful Tibetan monk that had panic attacks as a child. But he wasn't addressing that in the first day or two of the retreat, and I was sort of corralling people on the stairwell saying, when's he going to talk about panic? Why isn't he teaching us to meditate on panic? And I thought, after 5 days I should come home a serene Tibetan monk. But I am not. It's been 2.5 years, and I'm just beginning to scratch the surface, but I like what I'm feeling.
Well, not only that, but now you have written a book that I know a lot of people are connecting with because, probably like yourself during a good course of your life, you must have felt like, I'm the only one experiencing this. Where do I go and what do I do? Absolutely.
I get emails from people who say, I've never written to an author before. I've never written to anybody before. I've never talked to anybody about this before. And as I said, a lot of these people, you would never know it from the outside. They hold down their jobs, they take care of their families, they take care of business, but they just haven't figured out how to take care of themselves.
Fascinating for our listeners out there. The book is Learning to Breathe. Our guest today, Ms. Priscilla Warner. Priscilla, if you could, give out your website again.
Sure, it's PriscillaWarnerBooks.com.
Priscilla, again, thank you for joining us here on the Beyond 50 radio program. It's been a true pleasure.
Thank you so much. It's been absolutely wonderful.
You betcha. We want to thank you, the listeners out there, for tuning in. Again, the book is Learning to Breathe. Priscilla Warner, our guest. You can be sure to visit her at her website, PriscillaWarner.com. I'm Daniel Davis.
Priscilla Warner Books. Priscilla Warner is a massage
Warner Books.
therapist.
Okay, I thought very good.
If you're looking for a massage therapist, I think she's Miss Priscilla Warner.
Okay, we'll be sure to actually post a hot link on our website as well for the listeners, which will be found at Beyond50Radio.com. That's the number 50. I'm Daniel Davis. Thank you for tuning in. This is the Beyond 50 radio program, and remember, live your day past.